cameras are off, everybody.
Good evening. My name is Mike Landry. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Arkansas and debt. We're going to be talking about your future and your present. And with us tonight, we are going to have State Senator Brian King. We'll talk with him in just a moment. First of all, we want to talk about some things related to Arkansas and the whole issue of debt. Is it too late? That may sound like a radical question, but that's something that we need to face. Is Arkansas debt, like the debt of the federal government, too great for us to recover from? Now, we're not intending to be dramatic here, but these are the realities. Enrollment for health care, what has been called the private option, or Arkansas Works, it has expanded by hundreds of millions of dollars beyond the promised estimates. And here's something not a lot of people are thinking about: the whole issue of state pensions for the hardworking employees of the state of Arkansas. Right now, liabilities for Arkansas pensions, liabilities are $7 billion with a B, $7 billion, and they are only 70% funded. In other words, 30% of the money that is owed to Arkansas employees is not there. Now, these are facts that the people of Arkansas need to have solutions to. As you know, we've had historical changes in government in the state of Arkansas, but rather than the smaller government that we expected, it continues to grow along with the state debt. So this question is not an exaggeration. Is it too late to turn back the flood of new health care enrollees and the burden placed on taxpayers to save pensions in Arkansas? To talk about that tonight, my guest is State Senator Brian King, and his 5th district of the state Senate districts kind of goes every place.
It's a big district.
Senator, you go all the way from over in Madison County all the way down to Sebastian, Franklin, Johnson, part of Washington County where we're at. Got to be hard to serve the constituents of that district.
Well, it goes from the Missouri line all the way almost down to Fort Smith. So it's about a three-hour drive from the north end to the south end. I like my district. Anytime you get 100,000 people in a rural district, which I'm a rural guy, you're going to have a landmass. So, a lot of small towns, agriculture, working people. Everybody thinks they represent the best district, but, I'm going to say truthfully, I think I do.
Let's talk about some of these things regarding debt in Arkansas. The first question for me to put to you is what I mentioned in the opening. Is it too late?
Yeah, that's a good question. In 2013, there were several of us, when they came up with expanding Medicaid, said that we should at least wait, that the idea of expanding Medicaid with the law and the courts at that time, uncertainty, there were so many red flags about expanding Medicaid at that time. Was it going to create a disincentive for people to work? I mean, were we going to be able to pay the bills once the federal government stopped, paying 100%? We had the idea that, rightly so, that the federal government is still us. You had legislators down there acting like we had a rich uncle somewhere, that this money was going to come from other states. We said it was just going to add to the national debt. So you were actually adding welfare for able-bodied working age adults. So we had those concerns. Well, now in every session since then, we, at least some of us, have tried to say either not vote for it and not flip-flopped and went back and forth about it, but have stayed the course to not vote to fund it and look for ways to roll back the program. And it went to 100,000 very easily. It went to 200,000. And then now we're almost, I think, at 320,000 people, able-bodied working age adults. And now these things are starting to come true about we're having to pay the money, a state portion. And you're looking at the performance and the problems with this program that is so far removed from a lot of the promises. It's almost like the Titanic. I mean, you had the Titanic hit the iceberg, you had those that knew what was going on. You know, you had those that were warning about icebergs, and they didn't listen. And then they hit the iceberg, but you had that period of time that people were still dancing, people were still doing this, and there were some people going, "What happened? You know, what's going on?" And there are us that are warning. This is dire. I mean, we've already hit the iceberg in 2013 when we took on this program. And I think, as we talked about earlier, in 2010, a lot of us looked at the whole situation in the state of our country and said, we've got to get involved. We've got to make changes with the people that we elected. We've got to have fiscal responsibility. We need better ethics. We need people in there managing our state government and look out for our future, for our kids, grandkids, and everyday life. And you know what? In financial responsibility, ethics, those things, in Little Rock, the opposite's happened. I mean, we have financial unresponsibility happening on a large scale. By taking on this program is probably the biggest disappointment that you see out of what's happened out of the Republican majority. And, you know, is it too late to roll it back? Well, I'm going to say no. More and more difficult, yes. You look at things like 300-something thousand people on it. The governor goes and says, we're going to make this work, you know, referral type thing. And the reality is, it's not doing anything. I mean, and people, they have deceptively titled these things. Private option. Arkansas Works. I had people come up to me today still say, well, Arkansas Works, is that not a mandatory work requirement? I go, no. I said, what does it mean? Well, it means they send you some papers that say, hey, you can go look for a job. And the reality is, we've created a disincentive to work with our program. We're hurting Arkansas's economy because we pay our bills. We pay to educate our kids. We pay colleges. We pay prisons to incarcerate people and control crime to keep our areas safe by people doing one thing for the state of Arkansas, and that's getting up and going to work every day. And what they have done with this program is they have created a powerful disincentive to work. You work 29 hours a week at minimum wage in Arkansas, you qualify for basically everything. You work 30 hours, you lose it. So what's happened? People are quitting their job. And if you look at the statistics, and John Burris got down and said this is not going to create a disincentive to work. Senator David Sanders, this is not going to create a disincentive to work. Dismay. All of them misled the people of Arkansas. Because right now, you have over almost 150,000 people of the 320,000 in this program earn $0 income, not $1 income. So it's common sense to say that somebody that's making $30,000 a year is going to spend more for the economy than somebody making zero. And now we see the effects of it, where the first 3 months of this quarter, they are below projections of the revenue coming in. So what do they talk about right now? You see the newspapers are talking about not having an increase in special needs kids funding. You look at behavioral health, they're looking at cuts. And I'm not saying I'm for or against those cuts, I'm just saying that's what they're talking about. None of them down there are mentioning one thing about the worst program for the state of Arkansas's economy, and that's Arkansas maybe work, doesn't work. I don't even want to call it, it's Obamacare expansion. They don't want to talk about that. I mean, so that's one of the big issues that I see.
Somebody called it Arkansas Works so others don't have to.
That's right.
In 2013, on the House floor, then House Majority Leader John Burris said that the new health care law, what was then called the private option, it would not exceed $160 million per year. Well, now we know that promise was way off. Government, somebody has said, has the best history of underestimating. And is there any way legislators can be held accountable for this?
Well, it's getting harder and harder because I think you see people from our side. We had that fever that came in and we made such a great impact in 2010, and I was a part of that. When I came in as Republican leader, there was 28 House members. When I left after recruiting 2010 as Republican leader, we had 44. And I think it's getting tougher that people are getting so dissatisfied in politics that they think that, I think one by one it feels like sometimes they're letting go of the rope, I guess. Now they may go vote, or they may go do this, and it comes back to these people that you work hard to elect, like John Burris, that get down there and say it's going to cost, when the 10% kicks in, 160 million. We're not at 160 million. We're north of 200 million. Okay, and that means, as I've told school superintendents that were for this, now we're going to cut into your budget. Now we have, as one of the statistics I brought, violent crime is going up in Arkansas since 2013. That means that we're going to have to spend more to incarcerate people. There's more dangerous people on the street. We're going to have to do more to keep people safe. Well, that costs money. So what John Burris said was totally misleading. And that's what they have done this whole time. I say now, their tactic down there is mislead and deceive. They get in trouble. They have to say something to get out of it. They promise a number to get that's going to cost. It was never going to cost 160 million, because at that time they were saying only 225,000 people were going to be on it. They have now, in a short amount of time, missed that by 100,000 people. You take dollar-wise to cover that extra 100,000 from what he was talking about, federal dollars-wise, you're talking about $500 to $700 million. That's how bad they missed it. And yet you have these legislators down there that just want to ignore it, and then the next issue they want to do is deceive people to say, we're going to fix that. We're going to have this work thing that's going to stop. It's not stopped anything. Asa Hutchinson has signed up more people on Medicaid here in Arkansas. They've set record numbers of that. The other thing that John Burris and Dismay and Sanders misled people on, these are colleagues, is that we were going to save more on our state share costs for traditional Medicaid. We're spending more than ever. We're spending several $100 more on this other Medicaid program that is for the truly needy, the AIDS, the blind, the disabled children, those type of people that can need services. We're spending more than ever. We were told we were going to save money out of that. And the biggest thing that they've deceived people is Senator Dismay, Senator Sanders. I mean, I'll call them out by name. I don't care. They sit there and told us we was going to have this great verification system, that we were going to verify these people out there, that they were qualified for this program. Don't you worry about it. This is part of coming along with this program. And it was due. Well, the Stephen report found out after we kept after them, and I was on Fox News about it, is they weren't doing a redetermination on these people to make sure they're qualified. The reality was, the reason they didn't do that, Mike, is because you had this insurance premium cap that had to keep. So you had somebody that signed up on the program that moved to North Dakota. They're not turning in bills anymore. So DHS, and I've said this publicly, Selig, they lied to the people of Arkansas. They covered it up. Mike Beebe, all of them, knew there was these people that didn't qualify. There were dead people on it. So they keep them, because they're not turning in bills, against the insurance claims to keep the price low below this cap. I mean, it was a total cover-up. And yet, they don't want that to know. But the Stephen report, and a figure, folks, that you can get, showed that of the people on Arkansas Medicaid, and about half of them were the private option, 42,000 of them plus had out-of-state addresses. Almost 500 of them were deceased. 6,753 had no record of state residency. Total fraud. Almost 1,200 of them, and this has been a while, those folks, these figures have probably went up, were incarcerated. So when you're in prison, you're not going to turn in bills on a healthcare. So these insurance companies in this scam were making out money. 20,000 plus high-risk identities. 12,500 or more had property value greater than 100,000. So there's no asset test with a private option. So you could have $10 million in assets and still qualify for Obamacare in Arkansas. So you have these figures where these figures that they gave, there's one consistent thing that they've been with their estimates, and that's wrong and misleading. And, unfortunately, we're having to pay for it.
So technically, if Donald Trump lived in Arkansas and had one of those years where he lost all his money, he could still qualify for Arkansas Works.
Arkansas
for
Obamacare. That's right.
We talked a little bit earlier, and we're going to come back to some of these things regarding Arkansas Works, but we talked about the pension liability for the state of Arkansas at nearly $7 billion. It's underfunded, getting worse every day. Of course, we know the federal debt is what, about $20 trillion. What a lot of people don't understand is that estimates vary between 150 and $200 trillion. What's $50 trillion among friends, right? We have between 150 and 200 as a nation, $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities such as pensions. Every state like Arkansas has their own problems in addition to dealing with the federal debt. So, what is the legislature doing to address pension issues for state employees in Arkansas?
You know, I don't sit on the retirement committee, so I haven't heard much. I do know that there has been some measures come through down there of trying to tackle and address the issue. But a lot of times these problems have been, because as we talked earlier, when tough decisions have to be made, that's not a popular thing for any politician to do, including myself. And whenever you think about somebody that's got up and went to work every day, and yet they have been thinking that their pension fund, they're paying into it, you know, it's a hard thing to say we're going to have to make changes to do that for somebody that gets up and goes to work every day. That's where I have more sympathy for this type thing of trying to do things to solve things for at least these people that get up and go to work every day. I mean, and we have put where that will never, I don't think in our state budget we can absorb any type of major solution to that, because we have put 300,000 people, of which 150,000 do not even work at all, on a welfare program that's now kicking in and costing us money. So I am more sympathetic to helping that type of problem, because those people do get up and go to work every day, than I am the private option. But once again, you won't hear anything out of the governor of rolling back that program. He talks about only doing anything to expand it. And that's what I'm saying about our state budget. This component that we've taken in this Medicaid expansion, Obamacare, with this amount of people, has made it where it's going to be difficult. As I talked about, violent crime was going up. It is making us have this extra burden that is more like a wall that stops us from trying to work and solve these other problems like the pension thing for people that get up and go to work every day.
A lot of people have heard about Solyndra, which was the solar panel company that failed a few years ago. It was funded by federal grants and by some other programs. And we know that you and I ultimately are the ones that pay for these failures. There's already been begun on a state level in Arkansas doing things like the Big River Steel issue, the subsidization that went on there on the part of the state of Arkansas. And there are other proposals regarding this. We now have a ballot proposal in the state of Arkansas that is proposing in the name of jobs to aid in bringing businesses to Arkansas. And the only jobs, really, technically, no matter what a politician says, the only job a politician can create is a government job. Ultimately, it's the private sector. We can create an environment that helps the private sector, but ultimately, when I'm in government, all I can create is a government job. A lot of people don't want to call it this, but ultimately it comes down to being business welfare. And what do we do in the situation when we have a Solyndra of Arkansas type situation and that fails and we're on the hook? What happens then?
We've already had that situation happen, and some point Governor Beebe gave out some of them. And I want to tell you, as a politician, it is very difficult, because that's what makes it very difficult in the argument with people, because like a lot of times people don't look at it in depth and they think, well, if you vote against that, you're against jobs. You know, Big River Steel, for example. You had the other steel plant over there that they were going to bring in and compete, and it almost like you're picking and choosing winners. And, you know, I try and tell people, once you explain the whole thing, well, they're not near as receptive to the idea that grabs the headline of a politician getting out there and getting the shovel that puts in the first dirt, you know, because So many times, if you vote against it, you're against jobs. Well, not really. You're for financial responsibility and letting the pickers, pick the winners and losers out there in the business community. Let the people pick that, and create an environment is better, but it doesn't grab a headline. I mean, it's not on the front page of the paper when you're grabbing a shovel out there trying to say that you're creating this and giving this and having this kind of jobs. I mean, you can talk about adding jobs, and look how many jobs we've lost here in Arkansas. I mean, why not try and save them? I mean, and when you get into picking winners and losers and you start subsidizing, you know, most of the time it's turned out negative, where it actually costs taxpayers more than if you would have just not done it in the first place.
Yep, one of the things I said earlier is that government can create an environment for the private sector. If you could wave a magic wand that says, here's what I as a legislator, or here is what I as the king of Arkansas would do in order to create that environment for good jobs, what would that be?
Well, number one is rolling back the Medicaid expansion. You have almost 150,000 people of the 300-something thousand that are on this that earn $0 income. So, you know, a politician wants to go out there and create something at some plant that creates 2,500 jobs. Well, if you start creating an incentive for these people to get up and go to work, I looked around and drove over here. There's people that plants and want to hire. In our communities, used to, people went and worked at a plant because of health insurance and benefits. Now they're quitting those jobs. Okay, so like as I said before, somebody that, like my dad's 79-year-old dad, truck driver, still drove a truck today. That's his retirement. He loves driving a truck. He gets up and goes to work, 79 years old, 2 knee replacements, a rotator cuff surgery, 79 years old, and he works more hours in a week than over 300 plus Arkansans that don't even work 29 hours a week at minimum wage. I mean, my dad does more to create the economy because this program that they've done, what you had is a lot of truck drivers out there that signed up on this program. They go, well, I can only make so many runs and I've got to quit. So that's the number one thing we can do is Asa Hutchinson and Mike Beebe are the king and queen of welfare programs. And the rest of these people that have went along with it and kept it going has hurt our economy. As I said earlier, our first 3 months, we're not hitting our sales tax revenue. We're not hitting the projections. So if you want to increase sales tax revenue, you want to quit, let these people do one simple thing. Go get a job. We pay the bills in the state of Arkansas and everything we do by people getting up and going to work every day. It's that simple.
You've been around this for a while. What is the mentality of people in the legislature, in the governor's mansion, who say, okay, what is their mentality about developing things like Arkansas Works or the private option or things like that? What drives that? What makes them want to do that?
I think money. I mean, we now deal out $8 billion worth of Medicaid, and I think that we're seeing now that there's corruption going on down there. I mean, we had a behavioral health services Medicaid person get convicted of bribery. He was at one time paying a state legislators $1,000 a month to do nothing, consultant fee.
Yeah.
So they're getting these legislators. We had someone that very disappointed me. I knew for a long time, and very disappointed to even have to say this, but he was President Pro Tem. Michael Lamoureux got a $120,000 consulting fee out of an entity funded by a nursing home, a lobbyist, and a tobacco company. And he said it was to recruit candidates and do that. Well, I did that as Republican leader. I didn't do anything. It cost me money because I did that out of my own pocket. So the dirty secret that's going on down there in the Arkansas legislature, Gilbert Baker, another one that was, while he was joint budget chairman, was getting checks. And this is non-reported money. It's not like campaign contributions. So I filed 3 different bills in 3 different committees to say as a legislator, not preventing it, that if you do business with an entity that receives a large amount of Medicaid, basically, hospital, nursing home, behavioral health, substance abuse place, that you would have to report it. It's failed 3 times. I mean, we know down there the FBI's been investigating people down there. We haven't heard what's going to come of it, but I think that corruption is leading a lot of this decision making, and then you get these legislators in down there. The Democrats are all for it. We know that. Okay, it was just like SB 96. You know, when Hendren ran the bill that was going to end Medicaid. That's what he kept saying. We kept saying that's not going to end Medicaid. And you had a lot of freshmen that come in, and I felt sorry for them, and I'll give them a pass on SB 96 because I know what it's like to just be elected and get down there and have to trust people, or be forced to trust people when you don't really know. But they got in there, and all of a sudden, it's going to end Medicaid expansion. Well, I campaigned on that. Well, they got them to vote for it. There was some of us, the Cowboys down there, that held out and said, no, we're not going to vote for it. And I told Representative Bob Ballinger, he didn't like what I said on Twitter. I had discussions with him. It's not going to end Medicaid. It's not going to do that. And it did exactly that. And let me tell you how deceptive that was. During that SB 96, every Democrat voted for it. Even the most liberal Democrats in the legislature voted for SB 96. So I'm going to ask you, if Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi was supporting a bill in Washington, D.C. that was going to end Obamacare and end Medicaid expansion, wouldn't you get a little nervous that it probably wasn't going to do what they were saying, trying to tell you it was going to do? And the reality was, down there behind the scenes, the governor's office and the governor was telling Democrats, don't worry about it, we'll take care of you. We're just going to kick the can down the road, and we're going to wind up coming up with something that's going to continue Medicaid expansion. And you know what, Mike? Sadly for our nation and state, that they actually delivered on that promise.
You refer to the Cowboys in Little Rock. What's life like as a cowboy in the legislature?
I'll tell you, it's in a lot of ways it's not fun. I think that you have a lot of some of us down there that have stayed the course. You have had some that got sucked in that have come back now, and that is a very hard thing to do. The Bible talks about pride, and it's something that haunts all of us, including me. And sometimes when you get in a bad situation, stuff like that, and it's like the old thing of, when do you hit rock bottom? When you quit digging. And I think that a lot of these legislatures need to wake up, because they were sit there promised at SB 96 we were not going to have over 250,000 people sign up on this program. We're at 320,000 people, and no way of slowing it down, and it's just going to keep worse. And at some point in time, they're going to have to wake up and look at their kids and grandkids' picture and say, I want to leave you a better future. I may have messed up, on this and trusted the wrong people and went the wrong direction. We've seen on our state budget, I've missed in the first quarter. I said all the way back in the fall of 2014, we were spending too much money, and eventually it was going to catch up with us. And I wish I was wrong. I wish I was the one sitting here saying I was wrong, but unfortunately, I'm not. And a lot of these legislatures, I would hope, are going to sit there and look at this whole situation with our state and say, you know what, I didn't come down here to cut funding for the most needy people, special needs kids, or those people that need some type of service, or I didn't come down here to incarcerate dangerous criminals less just to pay for Obamacare here in Arkansas.
There are certain functions that we know government has. It was Aristotle who talked about the fact that in the local community there is a function for government, and we can look at that from the standpoint of cities and counties and things like that. And then as we go up to larger political entities, we see tasks that they have to do that the local community cannot do rather. And then we go up, say, to the nation, which tells me that it is not the role of the county to have an aircraft carrier, for instance. And we look at some of the things that we look for the state to do, providing roads, providing prisons, things like that. Itemize for us or prioritize for us. Like I said, if you can be the king of Arkansas and could do whatever you want from the standpoint of your values and what you see as important, what is the most important thing that the state of Arkansas should be doing, and work your way down a bit?
Public education at this point in Arkansas, we need to be making sure that there is a level of funding for people all over the state. They have areas up here in northwest Arkansas that our property taxes generate a lot of money, and other parts of the state don't. But they came up with a system that gave us a foundation level for funding education. So that's a big thing. Keeping people safe. As I said, violent crime in Arkansas is going up, and yet our state troopers are paid less than other states. I mean, I've looked at things of trying to cut funding out somewhere else, maybe give a raise to our state troopers, get more people out there patrolling, make our counties and cities safer. You reduce crime, it's a better economic. I mean, those are functions of government that we need to have happen. And the other thing is highways. The governor came up with a plan that he said was a plan to use surplus money to try and use money for highways. And it wasn't the worst plan in the world, but I said it's only a one-year plan because surpluses only happen when they're actually in the bank. And I said to come up with a 4-year plan to try and fund highways, a function that we need to keep our
That was
economy
going to
going.
be based on the so-called savings, as I understand it.
Yeah,
right?
and
So
then they said the savings that I've said earlier are not there. That's a lie. Let's just call it what it was. Those savings that they said that we were going to have was a lie. And they keep saying the same lie over again about savings. But highways, for example, people will pay more money for highways. I mean, if they have the choice in it. But we need to have highways out there. But as I've said earlier, the governor's plan just a few months ago that he said was a plan about using surplus money, first quarter here in Arkansas, we're on the deficit. Okay, there's no chance of a surplus unless there's some type of miracle happening in the economy. So, education, making our communities safe for people where you're not worried and you don't call Walmart Murder Mart, okay? You're not worried about going out and your kids going down the street and something not happening. You're not worried about violence of some type. Those things and highways are all functions of government that we need to have. Not free health insurance for able-bodied working-age adults at the expense of our national debt and our state economy.
You gave me a figure before we started this, and that is how many people, what is the percentage of Arkansans that are on Medicaid?
I think the figure is 40% now. And Governor Hutchinson wants to go out there and brag about we have the lowest unemployment rate in Arkansas history. Well, a lot of people just quit looking for jobs, the governor. But the reality is this governor has put more people on welfare here in Arkansas than in Arkansas's history. As I talked earlier, in 2010 we came in wanting physical responsibility. We worked hard to get, you did, and others worked hard to get candidates elected. We went down, and Republicans have set records in putting people in Arkansas on Medicaid. They've set records on, blew the Democrats out of the water in spending money on welfare and Medicaid here in the state. You can't continue to put the 40% that are taken from the 60%, because eventually they start quitting. As I said, when they put that program out there that makes it where if you work 30 hours a week at minimum wage, you don't qualify, you quit, and you quit working, and that causes the problems that we're seeing today.
This is not new. I remember many, many years ago when $12,000 was a good income. This is back in the late 1970s. And Paul Harvey did a series, the famous commentator who died a few years back. He talked about, this was in the Chicago area, all of the benefits you could get on food stamps, welfare, and things like that. And if you added them all up, it came to about $12,000 a year, which at that time was a very good middle-class income. And he said that is an incentive not to work.
Yeah, and it's much more that in Arkansas today, especially when you're adding health care, because people with health insurance are paying more for less coverage. People had their health insurance taken away,
Yes.
and they go out and try and find another job or suffer consequences for less coverage or trying to get coverage, while people that quit their job and don't work, or somebody that's never even lived in this state, comes in and they sign up for 100% free Obamacare, thanks to Governor Beebe, legislative leaders down there. And so that makes, when you go out and say these things, you talk about how the Cowboys are being treated down there, we just sit there and say, you know what, I know there's tough decisions, but we have stayed away. And when you start calling those people out, like I'm doing in this interview or whatever, I go out and give them the facts. We're spending more on traditional Medicaid than we ever have before. I mean, there was no coming up with a great verification system. Senator Dismang lied to everybody. You know, he sat there and said it, and then said he didn't know about how bad the situation was until I brought it out in my efforts. Well, if I go and sell you a vehicle, I ought to be able to come back and say, you know, all those problems and everything like that. Well, I didn't know, and you've been telling me all about it. I mean, and that's what I say. DHS lied about it. They covered it up. They kept it covered up, and you know, we got monthly reports. You want to talk about verification? We got monthly reports on each county, how many people had signed up. I never saw one report that had a column out there, people in Idaho or people in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
They knew, they lied, and they covered it up.
As I recall, when the debate was going on prior to what was the beginning of what was then the private option, one of the things legislators were talking about, they said, if we start this program, we will never be able to stop it. And
We
they
were one of
alluded to
them.
some state program, I don't recall what it was, but a program was started by the state of Arkansas, and then a decision was made to pull the plug on that program, and people were picketing the State House because something was being taken away, and that was put out as a warning as legislators, some of them were on the fence about whether or not to go with a private option. That was put out as a warning that if you start this thing, you're never going to be able to stop it.
And that was another lie they kept saying. They kept saying they were going to give these people notices that this program could end at any time. Or they kept telling us these things. I mean, they told us so many things that were not true. They told us that these people were going to get the opportunity to pick their own health care plans. 60 to 70% on this program, their health care plan is picked by a government bureaucrat. Not them, as we were said. They went out there, like I said, the verification system. There are so many things that happen out of this, but once you get, and they promise this stuff, the next thing is to mislead and deceive, and that's what you got. SB 96 was all about misleading and deceiving people to kick the can and get more people signed up until they could delay and do something. Now the numbers are so big, it's spiraling out of thing, but they don't want to talk about the bill that's coming due, because now, as I've mentioned the other thing about the special needs kids funding, or the other things, the other programs that we're seeing are going to suffer because of this.
You alluded several times in our conversation tonight about the Republican Party in Arkansas. What's your take? A lot of Republicans have been very happy about, for the first time since the days of Reconstruction in the late 1860s, that we've had a Republican majority in the state of Arkansas, and you've not been totally happy with the things going on, have you?
No, I've been part of helping get elected. I mean, and it comes back to financial and fiscal responsibility. We have better vote counts, if you want to say, on pro-life issues, which are very important. We have better vote counts now on gun issues that are very important. So there are some things that have changed, but the key thing that Republicans are graded on, or one of the things, is financial responsibility. I mean, we expect Democrats to not be financially responsible. That's just a given, that they're going to spend money like crazy, signing people up on welfare. And it reminds me, when I got elected in 2006, you have to remember, Republicans lost control of Congress. Bush was very unpopular. They had records amounts of people on food stamps at the time. Bush didn't spend very physically responsible. I remember campaigning and going out there, knocking on people's door, and they sit there and say, I'm not voting for Asa Hutchinson for governor. He's been in D.C., all this D.C.'s mess. And I'm like, I'm begging you, just go vote for me. That's all I'm saying. And give me a chance. And I've never forgot that. And I don't want to go back. And if I lose the next election because I tried to cut people off of a program that I think is detrimental to Arkansas, you know what? I'm going to go back home. Because I gave my word, my promise to those people. And it is very hard to keep that. Because once you say the things, and say the things I do, there are things that your mayor needs done, or those things. And next thing you know, you have detriments that come back to haunt you. And that's what makes it, when a lot of people don't understand about legislators, is that we have a lot of other responsibilities and duties that we have to do and get done. And when you say these things, like the Senate Pro Temp that's currently in there, Senator Dismang, he did another underhanded thing that asking Attorney General's opinion about, that put a $20 million tax raise by taking away the tax credit for insurance companies that got for employees here in Arkansas, and snuck it in a special language amendment that I know a lot of the members didn't even know they were voting on. And so when you do those things, well, you're not going to be named chair of any committee. And you know what? I didn't go down there to get a title. And like I started speaking about the corruption that's going on down there. There is corruption going on in Little Rock. There is, as we've seen come out with what's been in the newspaper, of money influences going to legislators that is basically bribes and kickbacks. And unfortunately, they are the ones that a lot of times are driving the policy. And like I said, we come back and I say, I'll show you my facts of the results of this program. 40% of the people on Medicaid. We're spending more than ever on traditional Medicaid. No, hundreds of millions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse when they promise. Show me anything different than what's happened in the facts.
Let's talk about your district. You mentioned the fact that you have the best district because it's totally rural, and you're a rural kind of guy. And most of my life I've lived in small cities or rural areas. And how is it different for somebody like you representing the counties and the long swath of area that you do, as opposed to a legislator who might be in Little Rock or who might be in Rogers or Fort Smith or something like that?
Well, if I walk around my district and try to talk to people in a suit and tie, they're going to be very skeptical of me. I'm a poultry farmer. Okay, that's what I did today. I laughed and joked and said, well, being a poultry cattle farmer and a politician, let me clean it up a little bit. I put up with political manure, bull manure, and chicken manure. But the bull and chicken will wash off at the end of the day. The political doesn't necessarily wash off of you. And I make mistakes. I'll never forget, I had an opponent my second term. And he said a lot of things about me that was not untrue, but he said a lot of things, and it made me want to be more careful about my votes down there and know. And it is very difficult. I have to tell people I make mistakes. You vote for things, as I mentioned, some of these other things. We don't have staff people. It would be nice as senators if we had personal staff people to help us. Well, you're increasing cost of government and everything. Well, I have to give you an answer. And I think in rural communities, you get a little better opportunity to talk to people and try and grab them an issue and say, here are the both sides of it. Okay? And I think that having personal staff people, even though some people might say, well, that's, increasing government and all these other things, I'm going to make a case for it. And then once I tell you, it's not going to be like the promises of PO. When I tell you something, I want to do everything I can to make sure that promise. I remember when we passed the photo ID bill, they asked about the cost of implementing equipment to get the IDs out to those people that didn't have it. I worked with Mark Martin very closely and his staff and said, we've got to come up with something that's economical. I mean, we're not a rich state that's going to do this. We came up with a $300,000 figure. I got hit, I don't know how many times, with, you're not going to be able to get that done. You can't do that. You know what? We came in something that these guys don't understand. It's a word called under budget. And we spent less. Now, ultimately, the Supreme Court knocked us down in a decision I disagree with. But we went into that saying, we're not going to spend that. These guys go down there, and it's a continuing mislead, deceive tactic. This last session, when they passed Arkansas Works and passed the appropriation bill, they told us how much it was going to cost. You know what? 2 months later, you know what they came out and said? They said, it's going to cost $300 million more than what we said it was going to do. And that's what I keep telling you they keep doing. Mislead, deceive. They get something done, they tell you whatever it takes to get it, and once it turns out bad, they tell you something else.
I had a legislator tell me, and I'm not going to say the name of the individual, but this legislator said, anybody who comes to you and says, we need a tax increase for the state of Arkansas, we don't need it. There is so much money already being wasted.
Yeah, there is some truth, but the thing about it is, with the hundreds of millions that got spent with the dead people, they're not doing anything down there to try and recoup those funds. What they want to do is come and you get in your pocket.
Yes.
And do that. They don't want to, we could spend more monies on highways than what we spend on able-bodied working adults and have the economy and have a better system. And, there are times that fees and maybe some other things that can be warranted and can be justified for that isolated argument. But, maybe highways, for example, people that commute every day and get to spend more time with their kids, or it's a safety factor, or maybe it's a local school issue that they sit there and say, you know what, I'm willing, even conservative people in conservative areas can say, I can pay this or not. And people have that right. But the reality is, we are spending so much more money. I want to get to the point now before we start looking at a lot of things is, let's get back to efficiency spending. Let's look at state job growth and $100,000 a year jobs have grown, 100 and something percent under Mike Beebe, and he was supposed to be a conservative governor. I mean, even under Asa Hutchinson, when he came in, I told his chief of staff, there's a lot of these $100,000 a year jobs are just, quite frankly, political payoff jobs. Yeah. And you start adding salaries and benefits, it doesn't take long to cut that back in 10 cases, winds up being at 1.3 or $1.4 million. Well, in 10 years' time, there's just a farmer coming out at me, my dad taught me. That's $14 million in 10 years. And as my grandfather used to say, that can buy a lot of ice cream. We can do those things like stop paying for kids remediating college. I mean, it's a tough decision that they're not finishing. You know what? Take that money, let's up the state trooper pay. Those are the type of proposals I'm doing. Unfortunately, what's happening down there is they don't care about that. All they care about is, well, that's a problem, and sorry it worked out that way, but by the way, this new thing I want to do, you need to get in your pocket.
This kind of comes back to the cowboy kind of a thing. One of the perceptions I have is when you go to the legislature, it is almost like you join a cult. I've heard the term marble fever. You go down there and you're around all of the marble and it begins to affect you. But when you begin to think about how people get indoctrinated into a cult, what happens? They get separated from family and friends. That's what happens with legislators. They socialize one with another. A cult will have you work day and night. Frequently, legislators are putting in very long hours. Does it really enhance, when you're involved in those sorts of things, doesn't it really enhance the possibility or probability that you're going to be cut off from your constituents?
It does. It's very difficult. And anybody says that, they can go down there and stay, I tell them, wait and see, because it is very difficult. Because I said, as a legislator, there's not the one issue that you care about that's very important, or the two or three. We have to deal with a whole wide variety of issues, even sometimes having to pass legislation. So it's very difficult to pass legislation when you've been very critical of some of the people or people in leadership. And that's what has happened down there. People don't want to sit back and say, Governor, you have kept this program going to the point, if it hasn't already broke us, which I think maybe it already has, you know what? It's going to continue, and we've got to do something other than what you want, and you have to look at the consequences. Well, I may not get this other bill passed or those things. As I said, the most key important thing we can do for our state and country is to be physically responsible. We're spending money, as I sit here and look at this thing, and we sit there and look. Everybody wants to blame President Obama for this deficit. No, you can blame Asa Hutchinson. You can blame Jim Hendrick. I mean, they are continuing to spend federal money on this Obamacare program that is doing nothing but increasing our national debt.
Where does Brian King go from here? Talk about you personally. You've been representing the 5th Senatorial District for the state of Arkansas for a while now. You were in the House prior to that.
That's correct.
Where do you want to be in 5 years?
I hope I'm back at the farm and spending more time around the afternoon with some of my family. I've been elected now going on 10 years, and it's very hard going back and forth to Little Rock. I mean, I do work for a living. My brother and I farm together. My parents are both 79 years old, and so I'm going to have to wait until next summer before I make a decision about where I'm going to run again or not. I mean, it is a very big district, and like I said, I'm not retired. I do have to work for a living. I hope that some days that when you leave this, that somehow this turns around, we get better. When I came into the legislature, Governor Huckabee left $1 billion surplus. People criticize him about his conservative thing, but you know what? He left $1 billion surplus. We're now running a deficit. I hope that those things turn around where in the afternoons I can get out and ride my horse and let my dogs follow me and spend some leisurely time doing that. And I make mistakes, and you know, you have to go around your district and somebody said you voted on something or something, and you know what? Sometimes, Mike, you just got to say, you know what, I messed up. I made the best decision for I knew right then, or there was so much being thrown at us, I didn't catch that. And that's what's frustrating when you know that you may have failed some people or something like that to something that's very important to them, or you have, as I've had good friends in the conservative movement that sometimes I disagree with on the issue. I think the world of them. You know, it's very, you know, we're not going to hit 10 out of 10 on
Sure.
the issues, and sometimes that one issue may be that important to a person. But I think if you stay on a course of trying to be as true to yourself as possible, and like I said, stand up and say things. I mean, I want to take blows, and I welcome it. You know, about, like I said, my colleagues down there, that I believe of the corruption that's going on down there. It's wrong. I don't care what party you're in. What I think is going on and what you see so far, you know, some of the tactics that is detrimental. I mean, we deserve two things as the legislature down there, I always say, a fair word or a fair fight. And I've lost fair fights, even with Democrats or somebody, and at the end of the day, it's very hard to take, but you shake their hand and go on, you know. And you know, whenever you come back around, you get a fair fight out of them, they may be on your side the next time. And give a fair word. I mean, as I've said, we've been misled and deceived. Verification system, I go back to that. Hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, waste, fraud, and abuse when we were promised a verification system that was going to weed that out. I mean, give people a fair word. And that's not happening down there.
As we wrap it up, Senator Brian King, anything else you want to say to us?
You know, I think that we have to look at what's going bad. We've talked about this new Republican majority, and everybody wants to kind of, you know, still celebrate the party after Reconstruction taking over. I always get back to one thing. It's about the performance and what we get done for the people of the state of Arkansas and leaving it better than when we got it. And we're held to standards. You see what Donald Trump's being held on his comments, while Bill Clinton seems to be getting a pass on it. As Republicans, we're held to different standards. You know, the corruption issue about what's going on down there, it's so sad about what's happening. And sometimes it's tough to be the one that calls all that out. I mean, I think Mark Twain gave a thing about the patriot is, you know, not saying I'm a patriot or anything, but is scorned and all this. And I get these things said about me, and I say, well, let's go back to the facts. That's what people need to, and the Republican Party needs to really sober up from all this and start really look at what's going on, because we're not being financially responsible for our state and our country right now. And that's the sad part, because at some point in time, sadly, this spending by Obama, Hillary, Arkansas Republicans, and what they're doing is going to bust and bubble for everybody.
Is it too late? Arkansas and its debt. We often think about the debt of the federal government, but we need to just take a look around where we live and start holding our legislators to accountability, because there is nothing different about people in Little Rock and people in Washington oftentimes. Very often people get into a situation, like I say, they get marble fever, and after a while they develop almost a cult-like attitude. It's an insular world, and they become very fond of being called representative and senator and judge and president and governor. And they forget oftentimes the needs of the people and the responsibilities that they have toward the people. What are you going to do? Well, by being with us tonight, you've done one thing. You've made yourself continue to be informed. You need to take a look at what goes on with your legislators. Someone has said one of the best things we can do for legislators and members of Congress is become an exoskeleton for them. Protect them from the pressures. Befriend them. Oftentimes it's very easy to criticize them for something they have done or something they have said, But what about coming alongside these individuals, being their friends, supporting them as individuals? And I like what you said about a fair word or a fair fight. Have a fair word or a fair fight, and support these people and hold them to accountability. Is it too late for Arkansas and its debt? That's for you to decide. Thank you, Brian King, Senator from the 5th District of Arkansas. I'm Mike Landry. Thank you for being with us.